Hi, everybody. It's Mickey French again from the Center for Food Integrity. We're a week later than our typical first Thursday due to the holiday, but hope you all had a good Independence Day. We are recording this early, so we won't have any questions at the end. And some of what we'll discuss is we'll have to just see how good our crystal ball is, because some of it has to do with what's happening, what happened this week in your time warp time. I feel like I'm in the TARDIS a bit or something. So um as always, I am here with David Hughes, also known as Dr. Food, who brings decades of global experience in the food industry to kind of help us look down the path and see not only what's happening around the globe, but his thoughts on really what we should be keeping an eye on over here. So speaking of around the world, David's just back again from Australia, where he spoke at the World Potato Congress. Who knew there was such an event? So welcome, David.
Well, great. And yeah, there's a world event for almost all foods. At the back end, Mickey, of last year, I was talking at the World Blueberry Congress, but I was in Adelaide for the World Potato Congress, and it was a cracker. And you remember the humble potato is. It's really important. Why? It's one of the top three human foods consumed. We've got wheat, rice, and then potatoes. And here's some fast facts. So world production, massive. It's 375 million, a million tons. And you might be surprised that most are grown in Asia. The biggest producer by far actually is China. We don't think of Chinese foods as being potato based, but there we go. And the second largest producer actually is India. But we shouldn't be that surprised, because if you look at the total population of China and India, it's roughly just under 40% of total world population. There's a lot of folk there with a lot of food to eat. Europe's big too in growing potatoes. What about international trade? I'll just a quick synopsis, really. I mean, whole potatoes, ware potatoes, as we say, are too bulky and too low value to be a big time in international trade. So the export market is more focused on processed products and like French fries, for example. And again, you might be surprised that the biggest exporters of frozen French fries, not the French, it's the Dutch and Belgium. So the Netherlands and Belgium. I mean, countries that, when combined in area, if you put them together in terms of square miles, they're one third the size of the state of Idaho, which is your biggest state for potatoes. Yet they dominate global French fry trade. Mind you, these two small countries, they're at peak potato. They've maxed out in what they can produce, and they've just run out of room to grow more. The potato, if I look around the world, it's a classic cost of living crisis meal staple, just in many, many families. And whereas fresh fruit and vegetables have suffered over the last 3 years through our economic crises, because they're perceived as being costing too much, but potatoes have just chugged along very nicely. They've still been affordable. Yet, I mean, let me tell you that, like many of our topics today, they have been impacted by climate change. I was looking at potato supply right around the world, and all countries I looked at had had supply issues, whether in Australia or Europe or the US, or indeed in Peru, in the Andes, where potatoes came from. Why, too much or too little water, or too hot or too cold. So off and on, and again, right round the world, retail shelves have been just bare of spuds, as we call them, of potatoes. And when this happens, they catch the eye of the media. It hits the headlines.
Well, don't mess with our French fries over here. I think that's
Exactly.
or anywhere, right? Um, no, it's an
Good point.
important global crop, and this is a really perfect lead in for our next topic in today's program. Our first topic is a bit of a crystal ball, as we're taping before July 4th, our day where we celebrate our independence from Britain. And ironically, they're holding their national election on July 4th. So David, what are you seeing the likely outcome is of this election, and why should people in food care?
Right. Well, yeah. So, as you say, Thursday, July the 4th is our national election day, and all the polls, all of them, are showing the government in office is set for a car crash. They've been in control, the Conservative government, as we call them, have been in control for 14 years. And I mean, normally I'm sort of positive about them, but they've run out of ideas and energy. And a change of controlling party will happen. And the new party will be left of centre, who will come into power. I was taking a look at the election manifestos of the two major parties, and they didn't have much to say on food policy, but looking ahead, the Labour Party, which is the one that will come to power on a landslide, I would suggest, will have such a majority that they'll have great flexibility in terms of the policy initiatives they can bring to the table. And here are three that I know will happen, and it will touch the food chain big time. First of all, for the UK, they'll be very aggressive on food security due to climate change and the fact that we're only 60%, 60% self-sufficient in food production. Farmers really like the sound of that. British farmers like the sound of that. I mean, secondly, they will continue and there'll be a greater green food agenda to meet our net zero targets that we've signed up to through the UN. Whereas the party in power at the moment has backed off these because they were concerned that it would upset the electorate and raise food prices.
Mhm.
And thirdly, the party that will come in, the Labour Party, have already said that they will weigh in really heavy on anti-obesity measures. And that really is code for tax and other heavy-duty regulation on high-fat, salt, and sugar products. So by the time our viewers are watching this, so what will it be, the October the 11th, the new government will have been in power for a week and change will be in the air. And those who supply food to Britain should just keep a good watch out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big election year worldwide, so which
Yeah.
can indeed bring change, good and bad, to the food industry stakeholders. So our next topic stays on the green theme and looking to the future, and this is something our dairy friends will find very interesting. An historic carbon law has been passed in Denmark. So tell us what this law may mean eventually on our side of the pond for carbon and cows.
Right. Well, this Mickey, this is big news. It's historic. The Denmark is the first country in the world to introduce a carbon tax on farmers, and the, the law comes into place this year, although it won't have a big effect until the end of the decade. Now, it is the first country to do it. You might remember that New Zealand, the New Zealand government in 2023 tried to do this, but New Zealand farmers pushed back really heavily, and actually the government of the day fell. With the incoming one being more right of centre, scrapping the new carbon law in New Zealand. But the Danish law will be coming, and what's more, it reflects intense negotiation between the government, farmers, the food industry itself, conservation folk, and environmental groups. Now, they're not all comfortable with it, but they know that it's time to take some sort of action. And what's it all about? When 2030 is when the impact will be felt. So farmers will be charged $20 per metric ton for carbon dioxide from livestock, moving to $50 per ton by 2035. Try to get a context here. If you're in dairy, remember Denmark is very big in dairy. They're also very big in hogs. So dairy is big in Denmark, and it will cost $100 per cow per year in carbon tax in 2030, rising to 240 US dollar per cow in 2035. These are, respectable numbers for big producers of livestock.
Yeah.
Scary for farmers. Mind you, I think we should all pay attention because the Danes in Europe want this tax to be applied right across the EU so their own farmers are on a level playing field. And if this happens, and it will, although it may happen slowish, but the EU will likely say nobody imports into the EU, into our wider market, unless our standards on the environment are met and met in full. So exporters who are looking at the EU as markets need to take special notice of this, I would suggest.
Yeah, we're seeing some of those climate-driven food chain actions on that side affecting our exports already from the US and Australia and
Right,
elsewhere. So
right, right.
our third topic brings together food and culture. We've talked about Jeremy Clarkson and his Top Gear fame, a favorite in my house at times, and his farming series on his Diddley Squat Farm. So, what is this show illustrating now about the fascination with farming?
Right. So, yeah, he's quite the man, is Jeremy Clarkson. Not everybody likes him. And we've talked about him before. And his Clarkson Farm show is streamed on Amazon Prime, and it's now in its third season. So the third season started in May, and in the UK, it's broken Amazon Prime ratings records, which I find fascinating. I mean, the show's humorous, but it's also realistic, looking at how hard farming is, and it really has caught the attention of the urban public. Mind you, for farmers, the show is loved and hated by them because the farmers like its realism, but they also think he's being, but they're being mocked a little. Mind you, Clarkson is no fool, by the by. He's opened up a hugely successful farm shop, the Diddley Squat shop, and he's just purchased a Diddley Squat pub to sell beer made with his own barley. So it's having a real impact on our public here. Other efforts are also underway to just show how hard farmers are working. In the UK, we've got an influential farmer union, which is called the NFU, the National Farmers Union, and they've just launched a hashtag Your Harvest campaign that highlights the risks taken by British crop farmers, what they do during harvest to bring food to the table, how it moves through to consumers. And it's just a reminder that consumers want fresh food and they like the stories associated with its production. So, not a bad thing at all. And I mean, in the same area, it's not quite the same, but I was taken by, I noticed that last month that Aldi, the UK hard discounter, which you have in the US, has just signed a 20-year agreement with a UK apple grower for a 200-acre apple orchard, which they call the Aldi Apple Orchard. It's a big deal for the farmer because it's over 20 years, and it's a big deal for Aldi because it gives Aldi security supply for British apples for 20 years and the farmer security of a customer for 20 years. And it's particularly significant in our market. I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, the fresh apple market is depressed and other farmers are ripping out trees. So, thumbs up for this guy. And this unusually long agreement, I mean, it could really be a sign of what the food chain might have to do in the future to secure supply at a time when it is becoming iffy because of extreme climates.
Yes, I mean we see that integrated supply chain more and more on this end with Costco and chicken farms, etc. So since we don't have any questions, since we don't have an audience and we're being taped today, we have time for a little final tidbit. Are there any other big food chain moves in Europe we should keep an eye out for over there?
All right. Well, Mickey, you might recall that back in 2021, so what, 3 years ago, top grocers and retailers in the UK signed up with the World Wildlife Fund, the panda people, for transformational commitments to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 from grocery chains and the supply chains delivering food to those grocery chains. So, but now, just in the last month, in June of this year, Lidl, 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 which is Europe's other big hard discounter, like Aldi, and Lidl is edging into the US, has signed up this pledge across all 31 countries where it operates in Europe. And so Lidl, a hard discounter, is on the green train, and they're no small player. I mean, they're the largest grocer in Europe. They're not a Walmart size, but they do have sales of 160 billion plus in 2023. And I think this move, it'll be felt all the way through the supply chain, uh, including implications at the farm level, of course, because it's those Scope 3 emissions which are the largest part of the carbon problem, if you will, in the overall food chain. And so I think this will impact shopping baskets by 2030. And in 2030, that's not in the far distance. Stand on a stool and you can see it from here. It's just round the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be watching our crystal ball, especially on the 4th. So thank you again, David, for your time today. And thank you all for joining us today as we bask in the sun or the rain, as the case may be, or go to the polls around the 4th. So we will have our next Connecting the Dots with Dr. Food the first day of August, August 1st. So that will sneak up on us quickly for our next opportunity to connect the dots across the food chain. So again, this is just one example of some of the programming that we bring to you. So please join us as a member, either as a company or as an individual, and take a look at our website, as always, at foodintegrity.org. Happy Canada Day, David, and
Oh, geez.
happy
Yeah,
voting.
that's a big deal for me. I'm Canadian, and I hope you all had a cracking Independence Day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure we did. All right. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your July. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye bye.